All right. Okay. So the title of my presentation is Reliquary or Problemblematic. And once again, there's grey tones in there, but you can't see them because this projector is terrible. Anyway, that's just a pun. But really, I want to talk about why we don't wear crosses. So what I want to answer is the question, is there any power in a cross? Not the cross as a concept, but a cross as an emblem. Should we wear them as a way of honouring Christ's sacrifice? And do we show that we are a Christian by wearing one? Now, you probably all know the answer, but I want to work through it anyway. So there is a belief in Western culture, typically through Christianity, that the symbol of the cross can ward off evil and protect you. So this has been used in history as a holy icon that can defeat darkness. So you see it all through popular culture and comics and movies and things like that, that, you know, when the evil comes upon you, you whip out the cross and a holy light shines and disintegrates whatever it is that's in front of you, or it stops them in their tracks. So is that true? Is there any truth to that, that a cross can protect you in that manner? So, whoops. Oh, sorry, get my timing right. What I want to work through first is the example that is set in the Bible. If we go all the way back here in Exodus, we're actually told that when God instructed people to make an altar, he said that you shouldn't lift a tool upon it because thou hast polluted it. So he's saying, I don't want you to craft anything. I don't want you to chisel it away, make it look nice, make it all straight-edged and all that sort of stuff. Because if you do, then you're going to pollute it. You're going to corrupt the worship that I'm asking you to do. So we have things like that. That's what we read about in the Bible, that they just stack a bunch of stones on it and they put a burnt sacrifice and that's it. Because God wanted it to be about the action, not about what the person has done. It's about the attitude, and we read elsewhere, what the real attitude is. But this extends to graven images. So, the simplest answer is that, we talk about that, we've been commanded not to make any graven images. And, if you construct a cross, you have manufactured it, you've made it. That's a pretty simple, basic answer. But I wanted to give more examples as to why God specified this. Now, this is the first part here is the general concept around idols. And whether you consider a cross to be an idol or not, I'll get to that in a bit. But this is the principle behind why God says not to make idols. He says, what profits the graven image that the maker thereof has graven it? What is it about you that gives the item any properties? The molten image and a teacher of lies, that the maker of his work trusteth therein to make dumb idols. Dumb means it doesn't speak. It doesn't say anything. Nothing comes out of it. Woe unto him that saith to the wood, awake, to the dumb stone, arise, it shall teach. Behold, it is laid over with gold and silver, and there is no breath at all in the midst of it. So there's this principle that it's foolishness to make something with your hands and then believe that it's going to come to life, that there's going to be inherent power in it because you say so. And that's really the principle behind it, that we shouldn't be constructing something that we then believe that we can bring power out of it. He says it's foolishness and it's a teacher of lies. Why? Because if you then put that in front of someone else and say, this has life, then you teach them a lie. Now, controversially, God asked people to make things. So on one hand, he's saying, if you're making an altar, I don't want you to craft it. I don't want you to make anything. But then again, he has told us in the Bible to make specific things. And this is where I want to go through some of these examples. He asked them to make something. We have Noah. He asked him to make the ark. We have the tabernacle. We have the priestly garments. We have the temple. You know, a lot of those things, God said, here's the instructions. And you can read chapters on these things. You know, the candelabra, the all of the things that there's very specific instruction. You can make your own if you can figure out all the dimensions based on what he told the people to build. So if he wanted them to build these things because they were going to have power or meaning in people's lives, why do we say no to crosses? Why does he also say not to carve out an altar in particular? So I'm going to look through 3 examples because there's a Bible precedent to why this is the case. We'll start with the Ark of the Covenant. This is one of the most well-known relics in history. In fact, you might recognise that one. That's the model that they used in Raiders of the Lost Ark, because it was something that God asked to be built, and Pastor Rob mentioned this, I think it was last weekend, or a fortnight ago, whenever. Anyway, yes, last weekend, where it was very, very special. And in fact, when it was out in public, it was usually, it had to be covered. It had a covering over it, and only the high priests were allowed to actually look at it in the holiest of holies. So it was carried by the priests, and it was a focal point of God's promises to his people. That's what it was there for. Inside were the 10 Commandments, which represented God's direction and law to his people. These are the things that I have told you to follow. And if you follow them, there will be blessing, there will be life, there will be victory. There was also Aaron's rod that budded, which represented the selection of leadership and guidance that was God's choice. He said, these are the ones that I've decided. They are going to be the ones that will teach you, that they will lead you. And I will put in place a strong leadership that is inspired and directed by me. And it also had the bowl of manna, which represented God's provision, his heavenly abundance, that no matter how many years they wandered around in the wilderness, God provided for them. Even if they didn't enjoy it, they were still sustained. They were still kept alive by it right up until the point it was no longer needed when they entered the promised land. It was also referred to as the Ark of the Testimony, the Ark of Testimony. It was a testimony, a testament to God's covenant with his people. That's what it represented. And when they carried it around with them, they were reminded of those things. So here we see that there's an encouragement here in the latter verse of verse 35. Moses said, "Rise up, Lord, and let thine enemies be scattered, and let them that hate thee flee before thee." The ark was a rallying symbol of God being with his people, and that he would deliver them from their enemies. We know that it was there, as we heard last weekend, during the parting of the Jordan. The priests carried it into the river, and the waters were stopped, and the people walked through. It was also there during the Battle of Jericho. They carried it around the city, and it was there during that victory. When God was with them, the ark was a powerful symbol. There's a situation here in 1 Samuel where they were coming up against the Philistines, and they said, "Wherefore has the Lord smitten us today before the Philistines?" They were losing the battle, and so they decided, we've got the answer. Let's go and get the Ark of the Covenant. Let's bring out the super weapon, the thing that will turn the tide in our favour, that will bring us victory against our enemies. And they brought it out and they celebrated, and the Philistines heard that they were celebrating, and they were a bit worried about the whole situation. It didn't work. They lost. The Philistines overcame them, and they stole the Ark of the Covenant, and the high priests were killed. So all of a sudden, the Ark of the Covenant was without power? How is that? It's meant to be a symbol, a relic, a powerful icon for these people. The reason is because those two guys had corrupted the priesthood. They had turned the people's hearts to evil. They had led the people astray, and they were doing the wrong thing. And God said, I'm not with you. So he withdrew his protection. He withdrew his power, but the people took the icon and they had placed belief that it would save them despite their relationship with God. And God showed them that's not the case. That's not how this works. I'm the one that brings the victory when you follow what I have said. The Philistines didn't get away with it anyway. God made it quite clear not to mess with him. We read the story of Dagon. They placed the Ark of the Covenant in front of their deity to show as a trophy, to say, yes, our God has won a victory over your God. And they were hands down wrong about that. Dagon, he actually falls over twice, and this is the second occasion where he is broken in front of the Lord. And along with that, they were smitten with emerods and also plagues of mice. They did not have a good time. And all of a sudden, they realized that what they were dealing with was beyond their understanding. The problem that they placed is that they actually placed power on the icon itself. They had fear about the Ark of the Covenant. They thought that was the source of their problems, and they had to get rid of it. And as you read the story as it goes on, people were very afraid of the Ark, especially when they decided to go and collect it again. And we have Uzzah's breach, where they put it on a cart and it gets jostled. He puts his hand out to stabilize it and he gets killed by the Lord because there was no respect for God's ways. And he used it as a focal point because the people believed it had power, but it only had power when he said so. And that's what we see, is that the Philistines thought, we've grabbed their weapon, now we can use it for ourselves. And God says, no, that's not how it works. I'm the one who decides whether this thing does anything, because I'm the one in control. Eventually they did restore it to Jerusalem, but there was a lot of fear over the people. The ephod is another one that we see as an example. It was an item that had special significance, but it didn't have any particular miracles or powers that went along with it, like the Ark of the Covenant. There was nothing that was particularly attributed to the ephod that happened. But it was I'm trying to say manufactured, built, whatever. It was constructed under God's instruction because it was to serve a particular purpose. It was to represent that the anointed high priest was the one that would be the connection between God and his people. He would stand as a representative towards them and to minister to God. That's what we see here, that he may minister unto me in the priest's office. And when you read about what the different stones represented, they represented the children of Israel, the different tribes, and it was a reminder of God's covenant with his people. And the priest was consecrated, so the garments were sacred, and they were meant to be worn by someone who would minister unto the Lord to help teach the people, to look after them. We know the story of Gideon. He won a great victory through the Lord's direction and blessing. And as a result, we read in Judges that the people lived in peace once again. It's a fantastic story of someone who didn't believe that they had the power to be a leader, but God knew that they did. And he made it very, very clear to Gideon and to the enemies that it was God that won the victory. Unfortunately, Gideon made a decision. He decided to make his own ephod. Now, I don't know what happened to the original one. It might have been in someone's cupboard, or it might have been in use somewhere else, or it had disappeared, and maybe he decided to make a new one. We don't know. But whatever his decision was, it was problematic because it wasn't the one that God instructed for the high priest. What Gideon did is he said, we need an ephod so that the high priest can do his thing. But it became a snare because the people used it for whatever they wanted it to be. And I'll give you another example. Micah did a similar thing. He actually made a graven image, a molten image, and an ephod, and teraphim, which are household gods. So what he actually did is he made his own ephod because they went, if you're going to worship a god, you need to have the priestly garments, and an ephod is one of them. So we'll make one of those. But he anointed his own son. He said, "Oh, well, you can be the priest, because we have to have a priest." And they worshipped other gods, and that was not the intended purpose of the ephod. God said, "No, I wanted you to make one because it was meant to be for a particular purpose, and you have taken it and you have decided to use it for your own ideals and own ambitions, and you have corrupted its intended purpose." In verse 6, it says, "But every man did that which was right in his own eyes." They went, "I need an ephod because I want to have a high priest because I want to worship my God. Not the God, but whatever I want to do." So it became a problem. The last example is the most significant one in this topic. The Lord sent fiery serpents, probably not like that. I think it more refers to the venom that when they were bitten, it feels like fire. And that was because the people had spoken against God and against Moses. They said, "Why have you brought us out of Egypt to die? This is your fault. We're all unhappy because of you." And God didn't like that. And he said, "I'm trying to save you. I'm trying to deliver you out of oppression, and you have decided to speak out and say bad things against me." So he sent these snakes to punish them. And as the people were dying from this, they repented. And they pleaded with Moses and asked that they could be delivered from this situation. And we read that the Lord told Moses to make this fiery serpent out of brass. So he makes it, he puts it on a pole, and the instruction is that anyone who is bitten, that they were to look upon it and live. And he does that, but we read here, and this has been brought out in a talk before, that when they beheld, and it means to look intently. It's not a passing glance. It's to look at it and consider and think about what it is. So what they're doing is they're looking at this emblem that's in front of them and going, "I've been told that if I look upon this, I will be healed. I have to believe that. I've asked for forgiveness. God has said this is the way that you will be delivered from what has happened to you. And if you do that, you will be healed. I have to believe on it." And that's what they did. And this is a type of Christ's sacrifice. In fact, one that is specifically mentioned by him in John. "And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up." Those that were doomed to die in the Old Testament from the venom, us from our sins, when they were able to look upon Christ and consider what was done, consider that in their repentant attitude that a man had died for them, they would be healed, that we would be delivered from the debt, that we would be delivered from our appointed death that was coming, from the poison that was in us, or the venom, and that we were preserved through that sacrifice. So the people were preserved through what they saw of the brazen serpent. So you might ask the question, wouldn't that mean that looking at a cross is good? Wouldn't that mean that looking at the icon that is a representation of your freedom and deliverance, wouldn't that be a focal point for you to remember that you have been delivered and you've been saved? You could make that argument. But in 2 Kings we read here that, I forget which king this is, but he removed the high places and brake the images and cut down the groves and brake in pieces the brazen serpent that Moses had made, for unto those days the children of Israel did burn incense to it, and he called it Nehushtan, which means a brass thing. Which shows you the importance of it. This is Nehushtan. Ooh, Nehushtan, that's a fancy name. What does it mean? It's a brass thing. It's a nothingness. Let's get rid of it. Why? Because you have taken something that was representative of the healing and salvation of the people, and you have burnt incense to it in a pagan ritual. That's the problem. That whatever the icon is meant to represent, people will take it and they will give it different meaning. And they will corrupt their perception of it, and it's not fit for purpose anymore. When God used objects as focal points, it was to teach a principle or remind the people at the time that he was with them. That's what it was for. Yes, he made them build an Ark of the Covenant. Yes, he made them build a tabernacle and all of the other things. But when they no longer served their purpose, they were forgotten. They were done away with. I mean, we see that the temple was ransacked multiple times. The things were taken. The Ark of the Covenant is lost. Who knows where it is? People have made guesses as to where it might be sitting. Does it matter? No, because its purpose is no longer required. He doesn't want us to make objects to remind us of him, because we may end up placing too much power on the object itself. And when we remove God from the focus and believe that the item has power, we have fallen for that trap. We read in Revelation that, the accuser of our brethren is cast down. That causes conflict, that causes problems in our lives. And it says that they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. What Jesus achieved through his sacrifice, that the Holy Spirit guides us, and the testimony of God's power in our life, that's the most effective symbol that we are followers of Christ. Not that we have an icon around our neck. There's a lot of people out there who wear crosses and they don't live lives as Christians. It doesn't mean anything, because it's who we are, it's the way that we act, it's the way that we talk to other people that demonstrates the power of God in us, because it's not us that have done it, it's the power of the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, not by any icon that we have sitting around the house. It's who we are that shows the power of God in our lives. So that's an X for crosses. So wearing a cross is not in itself of any benefit, because the trap is you might believe that it protects you. Because that's the trap that people have fallen into, that they might leave their house and they forgot to grab their necklace, and all of a sudden they're worried about what's going to happen to them because they live in fear. It's not about the icon that you carry with you, because the trap is you might believe that it has power, not God has power. Like the Ark of the Covenant, you can carry that thing around you with all you want, but if God is not with you, it doesn't do anything. You have to walk your walk with him, and then you'll have power, then you'll have victory, then you'll have protection. We need to remember that we have that through the Holy Ghost. I just wanted to address this one. There is a belief that having scriptures on your wall or fridge, or basically anywhere outside of the Bible, is a graven image because someone made it. I mean, you have graven it and you have put it on your wall. This is where the instruction is taken without the understanding. And if you wanted to say, is it idolatrous to have one of these in my house? If you burn incense to it and you pray to it every morning and you touch the words because you need to draw the power into your life and carry it out with you, then yes, That's idolatry. Because when you think that you are empowered by the object, then it's a problem. But we read here in Deuteronomy that we're supposed to teach ourselves and each other about the principles of God. You know, that wherever you're going, whatever you do, that you remember the promises, and that you bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thy eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates. Put scriptures up wherever you like, because they are there to remind you of the promises. That's what it's for. There's no problem with that at all, because what we're doing is we're reminding ourselves of the promises of God. If you have to take your fridge magnet and put it in your pocket because you need that protection, that's idolatry. But if you see it in the morning, you go, yeah, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. I will remember that. Or, you know, I'll be lifted up on eagle's wings, or whatever it is that when you read them, you are reminded of the promises of God, and that's what's important. The superstition that comes with the object is the trap. So getting the nicest cross or relic or item that you think makes you closer to God is a waste of money, because the trap is that you could rely on that item more than your relationship with God. And that's really the simplest answer. Let's put our time and our effort into building up our spiritual welfare. And I'll leave it there.